Howdy, my name is Callum, also known as Northern Dice, and today we are taking a look at Godtear Eternal Glade Starter Set. This is a full review and it is my full thoughts on just the core set. This copy was sent to us by Steamforged Games for our opinions. We aren't being paid for any media being produced and all of our thoughts are our own. Godtear is a unique, variable player, asymmetrical, head-to-head battler where players choose champions and warbands to take on their opponents in order to control these hexes and inevitably earn these tokens to become the winner. Players will choose up to 3 champions of any variation in their warband and bid it against other players with an equal number of champions. In the core set you get Morrigan, who is a Slayer champion focusing on taking out other champions, and you get Nia, who is a Shaper champion who focuses more on placing their banner. The game is played over 3 phases. You have the plot phase, the clash phase and the end phase. The plot phase is where players will use 2 actions per character to move them around and use abilities. During this phase, other champions are not affected by damage but can be given debuffs such as removing dice for aim attacks or strikes, or even removing the amount of defense or dodge they have, and even removing the amount of movement they can do. The clash phase is where players are then able to take to arms and fight each other, doing damage to minions and champions as they should so wish. Players earn points in the game through defeating champions, through defeating minions, but during the plot phase they can earn points by placing these banners. During the end phase, players will assess who has got the most points based on banners that are still out on the board on these objective tiles, and by whom is closest to this token. It moves across this track as the game goes on and players earn points, and the aim of the game is to have 5 points. In the first round you earn 1 point, in the second and fourth round you earn 2 points, and in the third round you earn 3 points. The final round is 1 point as well. The first player to get 5 points is the winner, so you have at least 3 rounds available that you must play, but there are 5 rounds maximum that you can play. Combat is executed through dice rolls, and there are 2 checks that players need to do. The first is a hit and the second is damage. The first is done against the opponent's dodge value and the second against their defense. If in the circumstance that it is during the plot phase, you will only use the actual dodge value because you are just assessing whether you have hit them for the debuff. You will do no damage. The other variable element of this game is that players don't just get to choose which champions they play, they also get to choose the scenario. At the moment I've got the life scenario set up, which means that a player who loses each round gets to roll the dice and choose new objective tiles to place. There are other ones including death, change, chaos. They all do different things based on what you have chosen, but generally speaking they manipulate how the board is laid out and change the routine of things that happen. The other thing to take note of with this game is the placement of the actual figures. Champions are large based and as such cannot share a hex with other minions at the end of their movement. Some champions in other sets do allow them to move through, over or push, but these as a standard can only move around them. These smaller figures with smaller bases can have up to 3 minions in one hex, and they can move as a troop and they can move separately on a move action. Move actions, when executed, would affect all minions unless stated otherwise through an ability. Another thing to note with the actual map itself that is made up of hexes, only champions can stand on objective hexes unless stated otherwise. Some heroes cannot stand on objective hexes, some minions can. Anytime characters move, they will move according to their speed value and it would count as one of their actions. Nia gets 1 speed during the plot phase, so she would be able to move a single 1. To place her banner, she would choose the claim action and she would place her unique banner to that location. Banners can only be removed by champions standing on them, so if Morrigan were to come along and stand on that, that would be a removal, which means that there would be no points at the end of the round for it being there. The actual number of minions you have in a hex can sometimes determine the amount of power an attack or an ability has. This is determined by 3 values on an ability, and it will be scaled to 1 minion, 2 minions and 3 minions. Range also comes into the hex values as well. Any attack with a range of 2 would be 2 hexes, and that would be 2 hexes traced. So we could go 1, 2 for this quartz link. In the same way, when it talks about straight lines, it would have to be the 1, 2, 3. You could not make a variation of change of direction. Some champions across the game do not include 3 minions, some include up to 5, some only include 1. The abilities and power of those minions often reflect the values of numbers and attacks and abilities, but it's not always as simple as that. Sometimes a minion can have an incredibly powerful ability, but be very, very weak in terms of their skills and attacks. On the flip side, you can sometimes have minions that have got abilities centred on giving massive buffs to the champion, with the champion being the forefront of the battle. It completely depends on which set you are playing with. With this set, you have Morrigan the Slayer, who is centred very much on doing lots of damage, and you have the Cold Burns, which are centred on buffing Morrigan and doing slight amounts of damage. Nia, on the other hand, is a Shaper, who is very good at dodging and defending, and she has her Quartzlings, which are very good at defending. Her ability is centred... Her skill set is entirely centred on controlling where the hexes are, and her Quartzlings can be used to change into further hex tiles. All champions have an innate ability as well. An example here, Nia's innate ability is that if she has all 3 Quartzlings on the board, she gets a bonus action, on top of the 2 she gets as a standard. Morrigan, on the other hand, is able to get a +2 bonus for all buffs and boons instead of just a simple +1, meaning that a single token to give her an extra movement would actually count as an extra 2 movement. All champions get a super ability as well that can be used one time only. In example, Morrigan's super ability enables her to give lots of enemies in her within space a massive debuff. The game only can last 5 rounds, and generally speaking, the number of champions you use will determine how long the game lasts. With 2 champions, we gauge the game at lasting about 45 minutes. With 4 champions, 2 on either side, you're looking at about an hour and 15. And with 3 champions, it honestly depends on how well versed the players are at using those champions. We have had games that have lasted an hour with 3 champions each. We have had games that have lasted 2 hours. However, it is always intense at all times. The only thing to take note of is when players take turns and when all things are done at once. During the plot phase, one player moves all of their figures. During the clash phase, it is a activation, 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 until all heroes have been activated. Anytime someone is activated, these cards are flipped to show the other side. As you can see here, Morrigan is currently ready for the plot phase, whereas Nia is currently ready for the clash phase, as depicted by the white background and black backgrounds, respectively. As you can see here, we have the board for a champion, and this is the same across all champions. You will always get a champion card, you will always get a champion information card, including super ability, their champion style ability, and their innate ability, and you always get the card space for their minions. In example here with Nia, we can see that she has values coming down this left-hand side. We have her speed value, dodge value, defense value, and her health. Whereas for the Quartzlings, we have the exact same, but all minions always have only 1 health. It only takes 1 piece of damage to take them out. Anytime a minion is removed from the board, they will come back to here, and they will need to be recruited, which is a minion action that only minions can take, and they would respawn next to their champion. Nia, on the other hand, her innate abilities include what is here, but she can also, as a standard, place her banner during the plot phase onto a hex tile. She can also rally, which is to effectively return back to full health once taken out. This would count as one of her actions and would mean that she would only get 1 as a standard. But an example with Nia, as you can see by her actual rock concert's standardized ability, special ability, she is able to get a bonus action as long as all 3 Quartzlings are out. If we flip these over, we can see that the Quartzlings and Nia herself have different abilities when it comes to the plot phase. And these, again, are more centred on the actual debuff and control of the area as opposed to doing damage. If you have a look down this left-hand side here, we can see that this is the range, this is the number of dice to hit, and this is the damage. None of these on the right-hand side have any damage. This is a good example of the abilities that players can see where the number of minions does actually equate to the value. With Shimmer, if you have 1 minion in that hex, you will roll 4 dice for the hit, 2 minions would be 5 dice, and 3 minions would also be 5 dice. Their special can only be used once per game. During the plot phase, she can choose a Quartzling that is the only model in its hex in an adjacent one, and then replace it with an objective hex. Swap it over and get rid. Once that's used, the card would be flipped so that you can no longer see the ability, so that you cannot use it more than once per game. So straight away I'm happy to say that I am quite a fan of Godtear. I've had a bit of experience now playing as a couple of champions in different variations of 1 against 1, 2 against 2, 3 against 3. and it's something that has sit quite nicely with me in terms of gameplay. I do quite like the fact that both heroes are so different against each other. Usually you'd expect some sort of core set where you've got so much variation with all the expansions and extensions you can get. You'd want something that's quite identically balanced so you can get a feel for the game, but these two champions are poles apart. Morrigan is very heavy on the aggression, 2 attacks that are very much big hits and can do lots of damage, and a third hit which is, I think it's Snowball's Chance or something, it's comically named, but that is if it hits, it is a guaranteed kill. Whereas Nia, on the other hand, is more about placing that totem, manipulating the battlefield, controlling different elements, and just being able to do things. Not necessarily a big hitter, but very good at avoiding that damage with that high dodge and that high defense as well. It's one where I have seen both characters win. Morrigan more so, but I think that's just because if you play Morrigan and you're an aggressive player, you're going to really fit in with that. Nia's playstyle is a lot more reserved, and I find that reserved players aren't ones that like being attacked and sometimes panic during that situation. So against Morrigan on a one-on-one, Morrigan will always come out on top because either the Nia character will panic or Morrigan will just get that kill and score those extra points to score the actual round token. The actual core box itself is really nicely produced. The actual insert fits everything in. It's quite a lightweight game component-wise. You get your models, you get your tokens, you get the board, and you get your cards, and even then, you only get 3 cards per character. It's not a massive deck, so you're really, really lightweight in terms of that. So setup and put down's really quick. What I do like most of all is the artwork on the map, but that comes as a double-edged sword because the hexes on the map are near impossible to see in some areas. You have to really squint, and myself, I'm quite poorly sighted. I'm blind in one eye, as some of you may already know, so seeing the hexes on the map can sometimes be a bit of a struggle for me, particularly if you've got 3 minions in one hex moving across. So I don't know, I like the fact that the art is stylized, the big log in the centre goes straight over the hexes and looks like it's covering it, but for me, I don't know, I'd almost want to go over it. I'm not going to, but I want to go over it with a Sharpie and just really emphasise those hexes just for that visual aid. Speaking of those minions, they're very varied again, fitting very nicely into Nia and Morrigan's playstyles. Morrigan's minions, the Coldbones, are very supportive of her. There are a lot of support style actions that they can partake in. Their motion is very slow and steady. They move very gradually, but they're always within sight of Morrigan, which is how their actual actions take place. And the fact that there are so many of them as well, it is very much that you can have them split up and try to conquer different areas. The issue I've got with Nia is the exact opposite. Her minions, you need all 3 of them out to be able to get Nia's bonus action, which is her massive selling point. The Quartzlings themselves, they're not bad, they're alright, but during the actual clash phase they get 0 movement. They've got an action that they can take that allows them to move 3 in a straight line, which is very handy, but other than that, they need to be stuck together to get that big damage attack of the boulder throw, and it does almost feel like their entire purpose is to do nothing except for move round in the clash, despite their no-feat actions, and instead use the plot phase to be able to change those into extra objective tiles. And against Morrigan, that works really nicely because Morrigan's more about the attacking and will probably chase Nia, which will allow Nia to get the banner out. But against other champions, an example of one of my favourites, which I'm going to talk about in another video, Mournblade, he's got the ability to place his banner 3 hexes away. And if Nia is always changing her Quartzlings into objective tiles and then respawning them, all that's going to happen is Mournblade will take full abuse of that and just pop his banner straight on there or at a good distance from another heat champion. I do prefer Morrigan, but I think that's just because my aggressive playstyle fits better into that. Nia, I do enjoy playing as, and I have had Nia on my team several times. But I think, for me in my head, of the 2 on this box, Morrigan is the clear winner. In terms of replayability with this core box alone, I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one. This is a game that you are designed to buy the core set and then purchase further extensions to it. So replayability, you can get a lot out of it, but you need to put the extra money into it to get those extension sets and get the extra champions. That's not a downside because then you're able to customise, choose, mix and match. But other than that, because you've got 2 heroes, one as a Shaper champion, one as a Slayer champion, they are very focused on what they do best, which is earning those points in those specific ways. You could try and play Nia as a Slayer and go for the kill every time. You could try and play Morrigan as a, I don't know, as a shaper and just try and focus on getting that banner out, but that's not what those champions' objectives are to do. I guess the replayability is the amount of time you're willing to put into it, playing each champion, mastering their abilities, knowing how to cash them in, and then adding the extra champion sets inside to get those extra experiences out of it. Replayability is going to be as far as you can get with how much you'll put in my opinion. Because I've got more than one champion set, I'm able to get a lot of mileage out of it. I'm trying to speak objectively and look at it from, if I had just the core set, how much could I get? But I think this is one of those games where you will want to get more champions because you will want to diversify your play. And inevitably you will want to play with larger actual armies in your warband, trying to take out other warbands of larger amounts, be that with these two champions or be that with other ones. Component quality. I say this quite frequently that I love miniatures. I'm a big sucker for aesthetics. I'm incredibly shallow when it comes down to it. This game is a winner. Steamforged know how to produce a miniature, and oh my days do they produce miniatures in this game. Morrigan is this big, tall, slender skeleton model that is just all terrifying looking, looks incredibly intimidating. The Cold Bones with their different weapons out in different fighting positions just look absolutely stunning. If I had any patience, I'd be painting those bad boys. They look stunning. Morrigan, on the other hand, she is just, when she's on that battlefield, just a photograph of it, she dominates that aesthetic. She is the tall, domineering element of this map, which almost makes her, as a Slayer champion, being red and being a skeleton, seem almost like the villain in this, when it is just a 1v1 battle versus battle. Nier, on the other hand, the entire aesthetic screams stones, being a bit of a, well, being a dwarf. And I think she is she a Quartzmancer? I think she's a Quartzmancer. She spawns the quartz things with her staff. She's a magic user. Her totem is a little geode, which I think is wonderful. Everything about screams mystical, but also very earthy, very ground-like, and it's just excellently produced. And again, because her model is green to go with the Shaper aesthetic, so you know it's a Shaper champion, makes it so that you know that, well, almost she is the good guy in that story. There is no story, again, it is just warband versus warband, but it almost builds that narrative in, and it really suits the actual characters and their stylings. The quartz things aren't as diverse as the Cold Bones. They do just look like little quartz golems in little different positions, but there's not so much emotion that you could actually get on a piece of crystal, I guess, so they get a pass on that one. The cards, really nice and easy to understand. I like the fact the symbols are so easy to understand. Each curse, each buff and boon, or whatever they're called, is symbolised and links to the symbology on the actual cards, so it's easy to see that if you've got a target and it's the black side, so you've got minus, you know that you've got one less dice of that. The health tracker is just little health tokens, and it is a culmination of how much damage you've taken. One thing, I've already mentioned the hexes on the map, so I'm not going to say that again, but the one thing that I did find a bit flimsy was the actual player mat. So that's the one that you actually get for your core player set to place the cards on. And the other qualm I have with that is that the core set comes with 3, which is fine because you buy the core set expecting that that will be produced for your warband. When I'm playing 1 versus 1 and I'm just buying extra champion sets within, I don't get another one. So at the minute, anytime we play a 3 versus 3, we have one of those main mats each, and then we have the other champions cards on the table, leave ones on the table, and it's no issue because you know where the cards actually go, what tokens represent, because you've got a template in front of you. But it's on very thick card, I'll admit, but it's just not for me. I'd have preferred it as a little mat or a piece of card or even a punch out. I think I'd have also liked it if it came with each champion set, but that's something I'll talk about in another video. But it makes sense and it does what it needs to do. The dice, beautifully produced. They're just black with little indentations. They're engraved, so they've got that white on them so you can feel them, which is quite nice. Component-wise, it's lovely. Art-wise, the characters look like the characters, and I guess it's more of a point for you to be able to paint them than anything, but they do look good. I do like it quite a lot. The other thing to notice is that on the cards, all the attacks have a little blurb to them, which I thought was quite quirky and cute. So if you want to give Morrigan a boon from the Cold Bones, I think one of the actual things is, where is Master? Well, that might be Mournblade again. I'm obsessed with Mournblade. But it's just the name of it's quite quirky and cute and links to actually give it a bit more of a comedy effect as opposed to being this just 1 versus 1 cold-hearted war game. and I think it's done really nicely. Player interaction's a no-brainer in this one. It's just non-stop 1 against 1. Your phases are very different across each other. The plot phase, you're watching your opponent move their entire warband, then you move yours. The clash phase, you take it in turns and you flip those cards to identify who's activated and who hasn't. And that player interaction is quite a lot of mind games in terms of who you're going to activate when, because it's almost a bit like chess in that capacity. And I hate using chess as a comparison, but because every champion is different, or even Morrigan and her Coldbones do different things, depending on which one they activate first will determine what they will probably do with the other one. And I think that's quite clever because it means that you've got to keep an eye on what your opponent's doing. But again, the player interaction really, really explodes into fruition and comes into its own when you've got more than one champion. In this core set, yeah, it is a bit more of a mind game on are they going to activate the Quartz Slings or Near first, and I know how to counteract, or I know what I'll do if they do this. When you've had 2 versus 2 and 3 versus 3, the 1 versus 1 doesn't stack up. When I played 1 versus 1, I really enjoyed it, and I did enjoy that player interaction mind game of watching what they're doing, establishing what I'll do if they do X, Y, Z. But when you've had that 2v2 experience, that's one that you will need every single time. And that's not me just dressing it up, that is you'll crave it. Because it's that really is Godtear, that constant want and battle for that mind clash and trying to take them out one by one, claim those tokens. I've gone rambling. The player interaction is good in a 1 versus 1, but it's so much better in a 2v2 and 3v3, and that's where it really comes into its own. So final thoughts. It's no lie that I do like Godtear. In fact, I dare say that I actually love it at this point. I prefer it at 2v2 and 3v3 because that's where it absolutely shines, but this starter box to get you started with a 1 versus 1, get you used to playing the routines of the game, I think it's superb. It does exactly what it needs to do in terms of getting you hooked on it, getting you into the routines and getting you used to playing these 2 specific characters. It doesn't give you any sort of insight into the other 2 types of champion, but it gives you a good idea of Slayers and Shapers. Slayers being the ones that take out champions, and Shapers being the ones that score more points for placing their actual totem. With that as well, being able to diversify the play by swapping over the heroes gives you that choice as well, so you're not just going to have a Slayer versus a Slayer. It gives you a good insight into what Godtear is all about and gives you a good flavour for whether you like it. And if, like me, you like that asymmetrical play, if you like that variability, you like having choice or having modules you can just stick in and take out really, really easily, this game is going to be a no-brainer for you because it is superb. If you aren't one for war games, if you aren't one for lots of variability, if you aren't one for high levels of player interaction, taking each other out and constant aggression, Godtear's not for you. But if you do enjoy that mind game style of what are they going to do, how am I going to combat that, how can I get the advantage, the big war game, it is a war game in its essence. If you are a big fan of that, then this is an absolute no-brainer. It is superbly produced. It's excellently artworked and themed and stylized, and it is excellent to play. And I've really enjoyed it. As always, I've rambled. Thank you ever so much for taking a look at Godtear with me and listening to my review. I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to continue to enjoy it. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be doing some specific videos highlighting specific champions and talking about those. It will be nowhere near to this length, and it will be less of a review and more of an overview and my thoughts on where these champions sit in terms of how you can use them and who they will have a good synergy with in terms of the core box. But until then, thank you ever so much for sticking around. I'll catch you next time.